Safs Lalo Makudiri on your home of humanitarian journalism, Salam Media. The time is 11 minutes past 8, and we're going to be kickstarting the show with a very, very interesting and important conversation. We'll return to a story of justice delayed and dignity denied, essentially. Over 25 families of apartheid era victims, along with the Foundation of Human Rights, are saying enough is enough. They're challenging the state's latest legal move, an application in the Pretoria High Court to delay the constitutional damages. The constitutional damages case they've brought forward, accusing the government of obstructing justice on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission referrals, the TRC for short. I think we all remember that one. I think after the dawn of democracy in South Africa, it was established to kind of get real and true lived experiences of apartheid era victims, to have the perpetrators of those crimes to come and confess their crimes, maybe get a lenient jail time of some sort. But this time around, the state says it needs more time, and they are blaming the ongoing Judicial Commission of Inquiry set up by the president. But critics say that the commission is toothless and worse, it's being used as a smoke screen. So is this yet another betrayal of TRC promises? Joining us now is Dr. Zaid, Kimmie, the Executive Director at the Foundation for Human Rights, and one of the organizations leading this charge for long overdue justice. Dr. Kimmie, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to News and Views. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning.
Happy to be here.
I think first and foremost, if you can just give us a bit of background on what happened in court. What exactly is the government asking for, and why are you guys opposing it so strongly?
Okay, so just as background, our initial case is about the failure to investigate and prosecute. So as you mentioned, the TRC process gave people amnesty if they made full disclosure. And there were instances in which people were not granted amnesty. And those cases were handed over to the NPA and they were meant to be prosecuted. And we believe that the government, through deliberate action, suppressed any further investigation and prosecution of those cases for about 15 years. And we recognize that since 2017, there's been some limited progress in prosecutions. But for many of the families, of the victims, no further justice is possible because the perpetrators have died and witnesses have died. So we turned our attention then to saying this failure to do your constitutional duty, this failure to carry out your obligation to investigate and prosecute is itself a violation of human rights. And that was our case against the government. We were asking for a recognition that the rights of these families have been violated, the payment of constitutional damages, which is not individual reparations, it's a collective sum of money that's meant to be used by all families to further the quest for truth and justice. So it's something very different from individual reparations. I'd like to make that clear. And then we asked for a commission of inquiry. What we have, after some negotiations, the government agreed that it would establish this commission of inquiry, and then, in fact, that commission of inquiry to be chaired by a retired Judge C.C. Kampepe will go ahead. But the government also insisted that the commission of inquiry should be able to answer the question about whether constitutional damages is payable, appropriate, and what amount should be paid. And we disagree with that stance. We believe that the Commission of Inquiry is important and it's useful and it should go ahead. But at the same time, we believe that this question of whether the family's rights have been violated and whether the government is liable for that violation is ready to be settled by a court. And that's what we're going to be arguing today in court.
And I think that's very, very important to note. Doc, you also arguing that that commission that you're alluded to, that the president set up, is essentially toothless. Can you explain why this process?
No. Yeah, I think I'd like to just set the record straight. We don't think the commission is toothless. Mm-hmm. We think this question of who gave the order not to investigate and prosecute and who followed those orders. All of those things were illegal. They're violations of our law, and they ought to be prosecuted. And we very motivated to be part of the Commission of Inquiry and to make sure that it does its job properly. So we understand that the Commission of Inquiry will only make recommendations, but we're fully prepared to continue the fight to ensure that justice is done after that Commission of Inquiry. So we think exposing the truth to the South African public about how those decisions were made and who made those decisions is important. And we're going to be fully participating in that Commission of Inquiry to ensure that we get to the bottom of this matter.
One thing that really stood out for me is the fact that the president is both a respondent in the court case and also a central figure when it comes to the commission. To some extent, that might sound like a conflict of interest. How is this being justified by the state?
Well, we wait to see how the state will justify that. But understand that a Commission of Inquiry will make a recommendation. The Commission has no power to make any laws or to prosecute people. It will make a recommendation about what ought to happen next. And it will make that recommendation to the president. And the president, as with many other commissions, is at liberty to ignore, delay, or whatever with those recommendations. He's under no obligation to act on those recommendations. And we believe that since he is in fact a party to our litigation, he'd be put in this invidious position of being both player and referee. And so we expect ultimately that after this Commission of Inquiry has finished its work, and it may take a year or more, we'll be back in court in any case. And all that would have been achieved with respect to this constitutional damages question is a lengthy delay in the families getting the justice they deserve.
And speaking about the families, we are now 30 plus years into democracy. As you mentioned, the families are still waiting for justice. From your interactions with them, what toll is this taking, on the survivors that you represent, both psychologically and emotionally to keep on revisiting a very, very painful part of our history and, continue to tell these stories without an end in sight?
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly painful process. This is something that could have been settled 20 years ago. More than 20 years ago, everyone had the information they needed. They had the resources they needed. We could have proceeded with prosecutions and laid these issues to rest. So, it's an additional trauma added to the trauma of losing a loved one. Now, these families have had to engage in these lengthy battles simply to get the justice that should have been theirs. And so, it's almost unimaginable the additional trauma and hurt this has caused, and the government's actions in delaying settling this issue and, admitting that they have wronged these families and that they ought to pay suitable compensation is only further traumatizing these families. It's a further delay upon an already long delay.
I know you mentioned, proper compensation, but in a more expanded, point of view, what kind of justice are the families seeking in this case? Is it about, prosecutions? Is it about reparations or acknowledgement, or maybe all of the above?
So I think one is an acknowledgement by the state that they've failed in their duty to these families. The second part is, as we said, through the Commission of Inquiry, uncovering the truth of what happened. And we hope putting in place measures to ensure that this sort of injustice won't occur again. And I think in South Africa, we've become very attuned to people committing crimes and then simply not being held accountable. So we want to make some contribution to saying, how do we change the system to ensure that politicians can't put their thumbs on the scale to determine what gets prosecuted and what not? And finally, this question of compensation. We're asking for constitutional damages, which is meant to be a collective sum of money that's available to these families and any other families in a similar situation. And the resources are meant to assist them in further investigation, to assist them with legal fees if there are further prosecutions or inquests, and also there's some part of that money being made available to families to assist in memorializing the family members that they have lost and their achievements and their contributions to democracy. So it's a fairly comprehensive solution. It is not individual reparations. No individual is being compensated personally for the harm they've suffered. It's a collective sum of money that's going to be used to advance the cause of truth and justice.
Mm. How can ordinary South Africans support this cause? And why should they care, even if they weren't directly affected by some of these apartheid atrocities?
I think we should care because we had an agreement as a people of South Africa with the state that they, in return for some people getting amnesty if they'd made full disclosure, that those who didn't receive amnesty would be prosecuted. Breaking that agreement with the South African people, which, and that agreement involves people who've given their lives to give us this democracy, I think is a fundamental betrayal of our commitment to law and justice. And why I think people should be concerned about this, because it sets the scene for further violations of our rights. It breeds a culture of impunity where people can make these sorts of decisions and simply get away with it. And, when it happens again the next time, what are we going to do? Shrug our shoulders and say, it's just too bad. I wish there was some way we could hold them accountable. This is one way now where we can start people holding people accountable, even after all these years. Give people a sense that if you do something wrong, there's always a chance. And maybe we need to work hard at making sure that that chance comes into effect, that there is a chance that you'll be held accountable and that your dealings will be exposed. And I think that is something we can all hold on to, because as we move forward, I think more of these types of issues and circumstances will arise, where people will simply violate their constitutional rights, commit crimes, and then hope that everyone will look the other way and they'll get away with it. And that's not something I think we can live with as a country.
Lastly, before I let you go, Doc, if the court sides with the state and delays the matter even further, what's next? Will you continue the fight, and in what ways will you be doing that?
We'll have to consider our options, and we'll talk with our legal team if that outcome comes to pass. But I suspect we will have to accept that this will be a further blow to the families and a further delay in their quest for justice.
Most definitely, Dr. Zaid Kimmie, we're going to be here for now. Really appreciate your time,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you. Bye.
That was Dr. Zaid Kimmie from the Foundation of Human Rights, speaking on what many are calling a final battle for justice, not just for the families of some of these apartheid era victims, but for the integrity of our democracy, which is something I feel like is really important. And as we've heard, the fight isn't just about prosecutions or compensation. It's about memory. It's about accountability and truth. And I think something important that Dr. Zaid mentioned is setting precedents, for future kind of scenarios where if we're faced with something like this, we have something to fall back on. We say people can't just violate people's human rights, dignity, and continue like nothing has happened. But 30 years after the dawn of democracy, with many of the perpetrators living freely and a lot of survivors of these apartheid crimes still carrying that trauma, it raises a very difficult conversation, but also very necessary for all of us in South Africa. But there's another side, and maybe you can comment on this. 30 years on, should South Africa still be seeking justice for apartheid era crimes 30 years later? Is it still relevant? Or should we be focusing on the future instead, as many might argue? Can give us a call on 011 680 0355, or you can send us a voice note or a message on our WhatsApp line. That's 061 766 0355. You can also comment on the live broadcast videos on social media. Use the hashtag news and views to share your thoughts on X, on Facebook, and on YouTube. And we'll read some of your comments live. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, news and views continues.